happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room for September the 21st, 2021, episode 216. My name is Wesley Fryer. I'm coming to you from Oklahoma City, where I have been doing some grilling lately. We had some grilled chicken wings tonight, and they were lovely. But on the other side, basking in the light which must come from the Apple goodness he is now fully experiencing, Dr. Jason Neiffer, Missoula, Montana. Hello, Jason.
Good evening, Dr. Fryer. Yes, I am here, and the days are getting long again, which is super awesome. I am in my upstairs guest room office in the Casa de Knife, and the sun is shining into the corner window in my office. I am in Missoula, Montana, where I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, Montana State Virtual School, located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in Missoula. But I don't think we're here to talk about the weather. I don't think we're here to talk about the light that's shining into my beautiful office. Wes, what is the EdTech Situation Room all about?
Well, Jason, since you asked, we are a weekly tech podcast, and we are a tech news podcast with an educational bent. So we are going to use our educational lenses to talk about recent news. There's a lot of Apple news, of course, and so was an event yesterday, but we will try to shed some light on big trends as well as just new details. We'll have some Geeks of the Week at the end, and you can access all of the show notes, which we probably will not get to, on edtechsr.com/links, where we have all 217 of our shows still archived. Someday we may make a new Google Doc, but we haven't yet.
Well, let's see. Our topics tonight will include security, the movement we call the tech correction, social media, Apple news, connectivity, Microsoft, Google news, a category I'm calling random, and I have kind of a personal story of weirdness to share with you regarding the random topic tonight, and then, of course, we'll do our Geeks of the Week. Wes, where should we start tonight?
Well, I know we're going to spend quite a bit of time on Apple news because we had a big Apple event. So why don't we actually start somewhere else? And I think I want to go back to this. There were a couple articles. Let me see if I can find what I put it in. This one, let's see, it's the Wikipedia article that talks about Wikipedia going to work. Did I actually miss getting that one in? Maybe I did. Well, okay. Let's go to social media and talk about Parlor coming back online because, and I'll drop this article in next. We have this one under social media. So this is The Verge on April 19th. I think this is actually your article, but I'm glad you put this in. Apple will allow Parlor to return to the App Store. As folks know, probably there were a lot of things that happened after the January 6th Capitol insurrection, riot, breach, whatever you want to call it. And one of them was that Parlor got deplatformed by both Apple and Google from distributing their app on the store. And there were a lot of other things that happened as well. So I think that it is positive that apparently Parlor is going to enforce some moderation on their content and that they're going to meet the standards that Apple, is requiring. I would expect probably Google is going to follow suit. And one of the things that is challenging in this whole environment is how much power the tech companies have, big tech has, over speech and outside the regulatory arm of pretty much at this point the United States government to some extent. But anyway, your thoughts, Dr. Neiffer, is this something that was inevitable?
Sure. Well, I mean, the news was the news broke as part of a response that Apple gave back from their government relations folks to an inquiry from a couple members of Congress. And the point they made was that there were some concessions made by Parler to be able to get back onto the platform, one of which was that they would start doing some content moderation. And we've reported a couple of times since Parler had been kicked off of major platforms that this was really going to be the inevitable result if they are going to get back onto mainstream platforms, that they would have to find some way to moderate content. And we also reported several weeks back that a number of Parlor users were surprised to find out that Parlor gave authorities access to photographs and posts of users as part of subpoenas, because they thought that many of the users thought that free speech, I'll put that in quotation marks, also meant that you were free from implication from saying those whatever phrases that would get someone in trouble in that context. And I think that there is a real kind of coming point here, right? That there's going to be a resolution where people figure out that free speech really isn't truly free speech, and that also there are implications to actions, even though that there is a vibrant First Amendment in the United States. It's never been unlimited speech. That's never been the interpretation. And every time the Supreme Court weighs in on free speech, it generally narrows speech as opposed to expands it, because the bottom line is that it started off fairly expansive, and there have been times when we've decided through our legal system that we would scale back a speech there. So I'm not surprised in particular that Parler's back. We'll have to see what their version of content moderation looks like, because if it is anything like the previous platform, I think it could be subject to criticism from the major platforms again.
Yes. And I finally did drop this link in. This one is a little older. It's from February 4th, but this is an article also under social media from Washington Monthly. And the title is, "When the Capitol Was Attacked, Wikipedia Went to Work." And I found this article listening to the latest Twit podcast from last Sunday, which predated the Apple event, of course. Is that right? Or was it? I think maybe this was at lunch. I listened to a panel talking about Wikipedia at lunch. Sorry, and the 20-year anniversary of Wikipedia. This is a fascinating article talking about how the fact that media is social doesn't make it unfixable. Wikipedia is a tremendous resource, and I will put also into the show notes this link. This was from Renee Hobbs and the Media Education Lab. They did a 3-part series on Wikipedia, and this was a panel. I haven't listened to the entire thing, but the point is, like, the Wikipedia that we knew in the early days is not the Wikipedia of today. And when you look at what happened January 6th and the ways that the Wikipedians responded, and how did they even decide what to title the article, much less vet sources and determine what to present, because shock of all shocks, when you and I log into Wikipedia at the same moment, of course, because it changes, we both see the same version. That's not true on Facebook, because based on what we've liked and the algorithm and all these different things, I mean, we literally, are presented, quote unquote, a different window into reality or whatever. It's just our feed is curated differently. And so anyway, I think this is a super, super article highlighted, because sometimes with this tech correction stuff and it's kind of doom and gloom and, oh my gosh, there's no way forward. Wikipedia has found ways forward. I mean, the platform has not imploded. They're extremely successful. When breaking events happen, one of the things they do, and they talk about in the article, is they'll lock the platform temporarily. And I think they said you had to have over 500 edits and have your account active for over 30 days. And they did that 2-day lock for a while, right after the Capitol, we'll call it the Capitol riot, the breach happened. And anyway, just a fascinating article. And I will say this, I believe that, I'll go on this, I believe that we should be studying, not only using Wikipedia, but studying it and seeking to understand it, because this is an essential part of literacy today, is the way in which, we've always done this in terms of academia, right? Research and attribution and sources and documenting, all of that, and the way that happens in Wikipedia is absolutely fascinating. But the speed and velocity with which, events are documented and shared. Anyway, it's just a great article, and I think it fits under that social media headline. And I really think that as teachers, we need to, if we haven't been taking a serious look at Wikipedia and how we can have conversations with students about it, at a minimum as a launch pad for further research and investigation, then we need to do that, because it really is a fantastic source.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see here. A couple other quick social media articles that I think are interesting. The Guardian reported on April 13th that there was a study out of the University of Lyon in Spain that focused on politics and political tweets. And in particular, they looked at Twitter. And what they found was that tweets were much more likely to get interacted with, retweeted, and liked when they featured a negative a take on a topic as opposed to a positive take on a topic. And what's interesting about this, and the Guardian newspaper article goes into some detail about why this is the case, and also how there's a real lack of research on social media by topic. There's lots of research about things like, for example, on Twitter, if you add hashtags, you're more likely to get interacted with. If you add links, you're more likely to get interacted with. If you add images, you're more likely to get interacted with. And that's really a lot of social media marketing on Twitter 101, but that it basically said that you're much more likely to get interaction from other individuals if you have a negative take on the topic. And we've been talking quite a bit, really since the beginning of this podcast, that the bottom line is that social media is obviously comes with a lot of baggage, despite all the positive things that social media brings us. And one of the things we have to figure out, and this is particularly true about educators, is how to talk to kids about social media in a way that maybe encourages better use of the platform. And when you think about social media, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that one of the reasons why a lot of kids are so engaged by social media is because it can be a bit of a narcissist activity, right? Like you can present yourself, you can ask for feedback, you can get positive or negative feedback from peers as part of your social media engagement. And if you're more likely to get more likely to get responses with negative tweets, negative Facebook posts, negative Instagram posts, negative TikTok posts, and that just gives you a sense of the challenge ahead of us in that regards to social media. Now, Wes, I have to say, you're a pretty positive social media guy. Your presence is generally pretty positive. Do you notice any trends regarding that in regards to your personal use of social media?
Wow. Yeah, that would be an interesting analysis, right? Maybe Apple's going to add that in their next feature set. How many different, things did you, what was your time? We got screen time, right?
Yeah.
Here's an AI analysis here's a content analysis fueled by AI, which by the way, I fully, read that article you had shared last week that said I would like, and it's amazing because it talks about AI on the edge, and not everything in the cloud. Anyway, it has me thinking about stuff, but, probably, there's psychology here. I mean, I heard someone today say there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, that is true to a degree in terms of human psychology, our brains, what we want to pay attention to. The velocity of information today is new under the sun. Like, we have not ever had a generation on our planet that has been globally connected, where both, information and disinformation and photos and videos and all this can spread around the world so fast. But I think that is probably true. I also think it's one of these things we need to be aware of. This back to the social dilemma, which if you haven't seen that on Netflix, go watch the social dilemma. We need to be thinking about the feeds that we're bringing into our minds and what we're spending time looking at and paying attention to. And I think that we need tools that help us, make better choices with that. That's what Apple Screen Time and Google Screen Time, these kind of tools, one of the things that they can do is they can help us be more metacognitive about our own decisions and thinking and our choices, and then hopefully make healthy choices. So I think I'm in the middle of my conspiracy theory unit with my sixth graders, third time. This is our third trimester, and I'm teaching the SIFT model, and F is for stop. We talk about emotion. We talk about things that make us upset, and how we need to be aware of that and be, thoughtful with what we do with that information, how we handle it. So I think probably as human beings, we are all susceptible to what the findings of that article were. And so we need to think about the choices that we make and the ways in, what tools we use to bring information into our brains and in front of our eyes and into our ears, and then how we use those tools.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll pick up one more social media since we're on the track. There was, of course, a significant decision made by a jury this week in the case of Chauvin and the wrongful murder of George Floyd. And so there was a really nice article that the Washington Post had, which I don't know about you. I don't subscribe to the Washington Post. So in order to actually read this article, I have to do it in incognito mode. And for whatever reason, there a cookie hasn't been set or whatever. When I'm just trying to view this on my regular Twitter profile, it pops up and says, hey, you got to subscribe. Well, and now it doesn't. So that's weird. Maybe they made it free. But the article is by Margaret Sullivan. It's from yesterday, April 20th. It's called By Bearing Witness and Hitting Record, 17-year-old Darnella Frazier may have changed the world. And so she was the person who recorded the entire incident of Officer Chauvin putting his knee down on George Floyd. And, that video was a video testimony that the world saw and that the jury took into consideration. And it is, and she was 17, and so, yes, we had the live stream of the shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand. And, we've had this terrible, and this is terrible too, right? The murder of George Floyd was terrible. But the fact that a 17-year-old young lady recorded that on her phone and shared that on Facebook, has changed a lot, and I would argue has been a positive catalyst in a very terrible situation for conversations that we need to have, and it points to the value of social media and the need that we have for accountability for all of us. And so I thought it was a good editorial.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that too. From a second standpoint, I used to do a pretty regular talk about the disruptive nature of everyone having a video camera. And by the way, if you doubt the importance of the video in regards to the Chauvin trial, look at the closing arguments of the prosecution, who said that you were there, right? You saw what happened. You saw what happened from a number of angles. They had lots of video when everything was all said and done, and that would be different than relying just on witness accounts of that situation. But one of the things that was always quite extraordinary to me is that I lived through 9/11 as a teacher. I was an early career teacher on September 11th, 2001. I'm in a social studies classroom, so obviously it meant that I spent much of that day and really the next several months helping my students through that and interpret that and look at that from a historian and political science perspective. But something that I've always been so kind of stunned by was that it wasn't that long after 9/11 that suddenly everyone was carrying around a video camera in their pocket via their phone. And there were lots of videos and photographs taken that day. There are archives online where you could see collections of that. The 9/11 Commission, part of their job was to collect every photograph and every piece of media on that. And there are archives that the Library of Congress has put together for that. But today, very little can happen where there isn't someone available with not just a pedestrian camera, a high definition, high quality audio video recording of things. And that changes really everything and suddenly creates a much different atmosphere for that. And I read those stories too post verdict yesterday, and I would say that well, to borrow some Wes Fryer language, this is part of why we need to help our students understand the nature of storytelling, and that they all can be a witness to everything around them, and that they have a role in all this. And there's a positive way to go about this to capture stories, not positive stories, but what's actually happening around you to provide perspective to others.
Peggy George in our chat room, and shout out Peggy, we're so glad that you're here, points out that yes, often people just retweet things based on the headline and don't even read them. To Twitter's credit, I'm trying to think if this was happening because of January 6th. No, it was the election. Before the election, Twitter started to do something where if you because would I ever do this? Oh my gosh. Or maybe it was on another page. So sometimes I'm seeing things in different panels. But anyway, if you had not clicked on the article to read it in the account that you were in, it would say, and then this has been brought back. I think this was just going for a while, like leading up to the election, and maybe they took it away, but it's back. It'll pop up and say, do you want to read this article first before you retweet it? So it's just this little nudge, but that's important. And Peggy also, pointed out that, sometimes there can be negative headlines to entice you to click and has positive content. I actually am talking to my students about what is clickbait, and we're writing blog posts. And so we're trying to, have a good headline, have a good title, but all those things are important to be aware of because yes, it is still a battle for our eyes. We don't live in an information economy. We live in an attention economy, and lots of people are struggling to get our attention. So, well, speaking of attention, I think, Dr. Neiffer, that Apple may have gotten a little bit of your attention yesterday and today. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, a little bit. I'd actually forgotten that that the event was happening yesterday until about halfway through the event, and part of it's during my work days. So, but I did tune into the last part of it, and then I obviously looked at all the media. So, Apple announced some new stuff yesterday, and to be super clear, I did think that they were going to announce new chips for the Mac lineup. That a lot of mainstream media resources pointed towards that there would be an M2 chip or M1X chip or an M2X chip that would be released that would include a bunch of new laptops and perhaps desktop platforms as well. That didn't happen. I've read some articles that kind of analyzing that to suggest that maybe later this year there would be new, I would call it pro equipment that would be out, like a Mac Pro, or perhaps there's lots of rumors about new form factors for a Mac Pro, maybe a 14-inch Mac Pro that would replace the current 13-inch that has a larger screen but not a larger footprint. But let's talk about some of the interesting stuff that was released yesterday. So first and foremost, the big hardware announced yesterday, the iMac is now available. They have not depreciated the other iMacs available. So you can still buy a 27-inch iMac with an Intel chip. You can buy a 21.5-inch iMac with an Intel chip. But they're releasing a new form factor that is a 24-inch Mac. It is the first new update in this form factor. I think it's in 8 years was the last time they updated the form factor in the iMac, which is an incredibly long time in computer model world. But they have the new M1 chip that's now available in the platform. And I guess the probably the thing that's most stunning to me, I mean, there's a lot of little stuff, but it's a really beautiful piece of hardware. They're offering it in 7 different colors. It looks like a giant iPad, actually. It's very flat. It's very thin. It's obviously very stylistic, and it will offer the very fast M1 chip in a brand new, very stylish form factor. There aren't a ton of details yet. Obviously no benchmarks, probably not a ton different than the currently released models, other than I did read an interesting analysis this morning about the potential new iMac, that they think this could be faster than the laptops and even the Mac Mini, because there's an active cooling system in the iMac. And I don't know where you fit that, because it is a pretty thin package according to the photographs, but they think that it might be a little faster of a platform. It starts at $1,299. You can actually get a faster one with more RAM and more space on it for much more money. But the new iMac is here. So I guess I'll start with this, Wes. Anything tempting iMac wise for you?
Well, I'm happy for my school to provide me with my technology right now. So we're not, planning to go out and shop for anything other than maybe, a new laptop for one of our children. But I'm just thrilled. I am thrilled because, the return on investment we have had, speaking personally for Apple devices that we've bought, has been stunning. It's been fantastic. It's been far beyond, I don't know. We're still using older Chromebooks and things like that. Not the ancient original ones. I'm still using a Dell Mini 11 for a while with kids, and anyway, we're getting years out of them. But I think actually, not hardware wise, the Air tags might have been the thing that immediately caught my eye a little bit more. I did not see the whole event, but I will certainly, I'm certainly excited to see in-processor power in all of Apple's devices. And I think that at whatever time, I really enjoyed as a tech director, having a 27-inch iMac and just being able to have that large space and things. And I I will be excited at some point probably to think about doing some more investment, but not in the short term. I think I might have mentioned our school, it looks like, is going to be rolling over, refreshing all of our faculty laptop devices to M processor, Mac Airs this summer. So that will be exciting, but I won't have to be investing in that for myself, but we may purchase one for a daughter, but she's going to be portable because, if you're a college student, why get an iMac?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the new iPad for a second, and then I can make a quick list of the other smaller things. So there's a new iPad Pro, two new iPad Pros out, and the larger one, the 12.91, is the biggest headline there is that they are going to put the M1 chip in there, which is their desktop class processor. That's the one they stuck into the marvelous and very, very well received new MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, and the Mac Mini in late 2020. And I guess I still don't see the iPad personally as a laptop replacement. I just think the operating system still isn't quite there for me. Although I have recently purchased, it's not a new iPad, but an updated iPad that I'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But it looks like a stunning piece of hardware, and it does have up to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and you can get it with 2 terabytes of storage. It has a Thunderbolt port on it, which is also a very pro move to throw a Thunderbolt port on there. And the maxed out iPad will now cost $2,400, which is just an incredible amount of money
for 2 terabits of storage. So
yeah,
if you think you need that, go for it.
Yeah, and it's got 5G support, and it has a USB-C port, which has Thunderbolt on it. And they're announcing something that they call a Liquid Retina XDR display, which has 1,000 nits of screen brightness, which is insane, right? It means you'll be able to see that very clearly in the highlight of day. So yeah, interesting piece. And then I'll just kind of go over the other quick ones. They're evolving the Apple Card, something that I, right at this point, have almost no interest in, but it does allow you to share your card with someone in your family over the age of 13. So in other words, you use your Apple Card, you have your kiddo put it on their iDevice, their iPhone, and they can use it with your approval, I believe, on individual purchases, which I think is an interesting piece of that. Apple Podcast, go ahead.
I'll add to that, we're seeing a dramatic clash of the titans here between the tech giants, and part of that is Apple versus Facebook over surveillance capitalism and privacy. And so one thing not everybody realizes is that if you're certainly having any kind of credit card with Citibank or Wells Fargo or anybody big, they are almost absolutely for sure aggregating all of your spending data and selling it to advertisers who are then going to be using that in this opaque cloud of data in the sky that is used to do targeted advertising and marketing towards us. So one of the things that Tim Cook said in the keynote, and I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched that part, is that in addition to disrupting other industries, they're interested in disrupting the credit card industry, and they're taking aim at this whole idea that our user data should be open for sale with or without our knowledge, and Apple is taking that on. And so the Apple Card is actually part of that same movement where Apple is requiring transparency in the kinds of data tracking that's happening with apps in the store, etc. So that's just a little footnote to that announcement.
Yep, absolutely. And then something that it surprised me, in part because it feels like they're a little late to the party, Apple announced that they will be releasing a redesigned podcast app, which I think is a long time coming. Their podcast app has been pretty stagnant for a very long time, which has created a lot of great alternative apps in the iOS App Store, but still, long time coming. The interesting piece about this is they're going to allow creators to set up systems to collect payment via the Apple Podcast app. And so I will tell you that we have no announcement tonight about charging for the EdTech Situation Room. The thing that I think is really interesting about this, and this is not Apple's deal, it's everyone's deal, that part of the problem with that, in my humble opinion, is that the Apple Podcast app is only available on Apple produced devices. And, you do tend to get a certain kind of consumer with Apple. So it may work out to offer, special content, adless content, maybe additional content as part of a podcast feed. But I can't imagine a lot of creators would focus on the Apple ecosystem only, not allowing others to take advantage of advanced features as they would charge for. So that was an interesting piece. There's new purple. Oh, please, sir.
Yeah, so I dropped in your Recode Vox article about that on the podcast subscription plans. I just dropped in a Gizmodo article that I put in the same category of Apple, entitled "The Podcast War Has Begun," by John Biggs, and this was yesterday on the 20th of April. So we've talked about this on the show, the purchase by Spotify of Gimlet Media and Anchor, and this play for exclusive content. You're seeing that on Netflix. You're seeing that on, Disney Plus or whatever, Apple TV Plus, all of these different platforms, exclusive content. Famously, Joe Rogan, who's all of his shows are not family friendly, but he's got some pretty good interviews with some different people. I've listened to a handful of his shows over the years. He's exclusive to Spotify now. He had to delete some of his shows. Some of his content was deleted. I don't know if I put that in the show notes here a couple weeks ago, but this is a good article about the podcast wars, and what this may present for podcasters is the need to have multiple feeds, right? So you may still have a public feed out there that any kind of aggregator can pick up, Google Home. Jason and I are both fans of Pocket Casts, which is an Australian-based podcast app. It's available on Android. It's available on Apple. Hey, and if you even switch from one to another, your feed syncs up. Just log in with your account. It's beautiful. But I've been hearing more podcasters, using Patreon and then having bonus episodes for subscribers and things like that. One of the stunning statistics that was in the Apple event yesterday is that when they launched podcasts in iTunes at the time, now it's called Apple Music, there were just like 3,000. It was it was below 10,000. I think it was like 3,000 or 5,000 podcasts. There's over a million podcasts. So if you want to talk about a statistic that represents the incredible fractured landscape of information today, look at how many podcasts are available in 2021 compared to the early days of 2005. So I love podcasts. I love learning with podcasts. We mentioned on the show a while back, China never had a free podcast model, and so they've been monetized for the whole time. Obviously, people need to make money, but there's all kinds of people in this situation. There's professional journalists and tech journalists and others, and Substack has become this newsletter format that a number of journalists are being very successful with and being able to get subscriptions and supporting themselves with, and that is exciting. But I think that this is going to be a continued fracturization, if that's even a word, fracturization, more fractured landscape of podcasts. So yeah, I'm sure Jason and I'll have some conversations about that. Honestly, it doesn't appeal to me that we're doing this every week, but we're not making our living doing this. We're not getting anything for this actually. So you guys need to come hire us to come, keynote your company. Get a little,
Exactly.
By the way, you can do that.
yeah. Neiffer.com, westfryer.com. But the thing I would also note here, that the coming podcast war is going to be extraordinary. What I hope happens, though, is that it doesn't create a platform where small free shops like ours can't be in the open marketplace anymore. If we have to start submitting our podcasts to dozens of different architectures to do that, that's going to diminish, I think, the value of smaller podcasts like ours. Like, obviously, we're not making bank on this. We're not making anything at all on it, to be honest. We get out of this is the ability to talk to a lot of folks in different geographical areas. I've had people come up to me at ISTE and at DLAC and introduce themselves to me as listeners to the podcast. It stunned me a little bit. One person said that they'd heard my voice walking down the hallway at a conference and said, "Is that Jason Neiffer?" And I'm like, "How do you even know my name?" Right? And that in itself is maybe worth the hour we spend a week. But we do this because we enjoy each other's company and we like talking about this. It helps us professionally.
We love meeting with Peggy. We love meeting with Peggy. So
exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. But Spotify has been making moves for over 2 years in the podcast area. And I just hope that I think it's great to add economics to this. I think it's great to make a clear way for people to make money, to do this, that want to make this a career. But my sincere hope is that we can still allow this to be an open marketplace, an open platform for people like ourselves, and for kids too, I might add, to continue to publish to wide audiences.
And one more thought I have on this is, I know, Jason, you mentioned several times that you contribute to some Patreons and pay for journalism, and quality journalism is worth paying for. I think we all are probably going to start getting adjusted, but this is a good mindset thing to think about. What is our monthly spend on media? Probably our local cable company has had a lion's share of that. Probably. I mean, you don't actually have to pay for cable to get open air, television programming in our area. We've got some real, powerful antennas, and if you just want to watch that, you can. That's actually how we watch the weather, when it's tornado season, as it is right now. Actually, we're gearing up right into it right now. But I think that for a healthy society and culture in this interconnected world, we are going to want a lot of people to pay small amounts to different information sources, companies, and journalists. And the alternative to that would be just these huge, massive companies, big media, which we've seen that movie before, big media dominating. And what Jason is talking about, and I totally agree with, is, it's incredible to just be a creator out there and be on Apple's podcast, people to be able to subscribe to you and to be on smart speakers, right? And to be able to say, hey, play the latest episode of, the EdTech Situation Room, and you start to hear it. It's really powerful and cool. So I don't think that the small creators I think it's still a good time, and we're going to see a struggle, right? Just as we see big tech struggling to deal with a lot of things, companies and corporations are going to continue to want to make money, and lots of people are going to be able to make money. And I think there's room for that. But as individuals, and this is maybe something I need to talk to my wife about, and we can consider, like, even budgeting, maybe that's something that needs to be in our monthly budget, to say, hey, we're going to have this chunk of change, and then we're going to use that to support some different creators that we really like listening to and want to listen to. Now, the fact is, we're all going to have a limit to that. That will be an interesting study. So maybe if you're looking for your dissertation topic, maybe that'll be a topic you can study. Like, what's going to be the cap? Because you're probably not going to be supporting, 100 different creators out there. But anyway, the media that you're wanting to pay for. And then the other thing it was in the Twit podcast, I think, from this past Sunday. They talked about aggregators, and Apple's unsuccessfully done that with Apple News. Of course, they try to keep that just on the Apple platform, but there are going to be groups probably that will continue, to aggregate, and then for you to make this to say, oh, okay, it's kind of like Disney or Disney Plus. Oh, well, look at Marvel and Star Wars and National Geographic and Pixar, and like, okay, that's a bundle I want to pay for. Probably we're going to see smaller creators join together in these different organizations, and there'll be a lot of stuff happening. But it is a new twist. Some people would say it's been a long time coming for Apple to be able to offer this, but it's not just Apple. They're actually, in this case, I think, responding to other things that we're seeing that are very successful, like Patreon, like Substack. And then we're seeing Spotify make this really big play to try to have you just listen on Spotify. We hope you'll listen to us wherever you find your podcasts. And you probably have heard us say that before. So hopefully that will not change.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, other products announced. Do you care at all about a purple iPhone?
As a K-State Wildcat fan, freaking great. I'm ready to go order one tomorrow. But we've actually put a couple iPhones on plans recently, and I'm not going to be in the market for that. But yeah, it's cool, and I do have an affinity for purple. But the one I'm most excited about are the AirTags, and I think you put an article about AirTags in there. AirTags are, I guess it's going to be actually an open API. Jason put the 9 to 5 Mac article from yesterday. Apple officially unveils the AirTag item tracker. I think you can get like 5 of these for $100 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be directional, and it also leverages the ecosphere of all these iPhones that are out in the world, right? So, what do you want to put one of these things on? Luggage, a dog, your remote control in your house. And you've played with tiles before. Yep. So does this new technology excite you any more than the tile did, or do you think it's just, kind of a shift and this is just Apple's version?
I'm gonna have to see what the features look like, because that matters to me a lot. But Tile already is pretty advanced in this architecture and does exactly what you were talking about that the Apple tags will do. What I love about this is that if I lose something and it's lost in a location that's not my home, right? Like I do have one of these sitting on my keys. I have one sitting in my backpack. I have a super thin one that's sitting in my wallet. But if I'm running late in the morning and I've lost my keys, all I need to do is to take my Tile or turn my Tile app on, and it will find it. It will tell me how close it is to me, and then it will start a sound so I can go and find it. And I found my keys in the couch cushions before, and falling behind a counter or something on a countertop, and it's been really great. I will tell you that in the most uniquely Apple thing ever, the tags themselves need like a case or something around. They don't come with a hook to put on a key ring. So instead, you can buy a $300 one right now from Apple that is very fancy. It's a designer version of that. And I noticed yesterday when I went and looked that Amazon now has hundreds of cheap tag holders that you can buy. But I think it's a very clever model. I'll need to see if Apple ends up putting an app on Android. My understanding from the articles I read today is that Android apps can also be part of the ecosystem. So I don't exactly know what that means unless you have the app downloaded itself. But one of the cool things about Tile is that it utilizes other Tile users. And so, if I'm at an airport and a couple days later, I'll get a notification saying someone thanked me because my phone sniffed out a tile at an airport and let a user know that, where the general location was of an item that they had lost. I think it's a really clever idea. I think it's smart for Apple to go in this direction. I did, and I wish I'd thrown the article in. I do know that Tile has already started responding in a way to suggest they are panicked that Apple's in this ecosystem now. But I love Tile. Tile's been a really great thing for me, and I think it's a really wonderful strategy for keeping an eye on your stuff.
Okay, well, we've got about, we started maybe a minute or two later. So we got about 17 or 18 minutes. We've been like exactly an hour and 3 minutes, by the way, for like 3 weeks in a row. So that's kind of wild. You've got great security headlines in there and Google World and some others. So what other burning issues do you definitely want to get to, Dr. Neiffer, or even categories?
Well, let's talk about a couple quick Google articles. First, Chrome Unbox article from yesterday that Lenovo is going to release 2 MediaTek Chromebooks, and these are low-end Chromebooks, and not low-end as in cheap, but low-end as in inexpensive, in that the MediaTek processors we've been talking about are ARM-based processors. MediaTek is a Chinese-based manufacturer of chips, and the MediaTek chipset is considered to be a low-end chipset, but the MediaTek chipset was the same chipset that was in the Lenovo Duo, the tablet, the Chrome OS tablet they released last year, that is still considered to be the best Chrome OS tablet, and it's pretty speedy implementation of Chrome OS. And the reason why I mention this is because I do think that this is turning out to be not the year of the ARM processor, because it really started last year. I think it's going to go into this year and next year, but all the major platforms, Chrome OS, Mac OS, and Microsoft, I think are going to find their way on non-Intel, non-x86 hardware. And I think that's an interesting thing to come. And then I want to talk about one quick news one, and then maybe one that's a little more for discussion. Chrome Unboxed highlighted something that frustrated the snot out of me last week. Last week I opened up, my day job, the Montana Digital Academy, we're a Google shop. And so I do 99% of my document work in Google Docs, right? That's where I do it. I very rarely open Word. I've got access to Word. I just don't need it because I prefer Google Docs. I love it. Wrote my dissertation in it. Google Docs has been a good friend of mine for a long time. And I noticed something last week that I was opening up my docs, and for some reason, it was like there was no right border to the page, and every line ran over to where there was one paragraph per line. So I thought it was just one document. I started making all these changes to it, trying to fix it because it was a document that needed to be accessible to the public. Then I sent a link over to a good friend of mine and coworker, Mike, to see. He says, "No, it looks fine, dude. I don't know what your problem is." So I started opening up other Google Docs, and all of them were funkified, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And Mike goes, "Well, check to see. Do you have any plugins that may be impacting it?" So I turned plugin after plugin off on my work account, and it turns out my ad blocker was creating the issue. And so Chrome Unboxed noted that your ad blocker may be responsible for screwing up your Google Docs. My understanding is they've corrected the issue now. But oh my Lord, that was frustrating. But that's happened to me a couple of times now in the last couple of years, to where one of my plugins in Chrome has substantially impacted my use of the platform, the web platform, in some way, shape, or form. And so always consider getting rid of plugins you don't need, turning off plugins you don't use very often, and then turning off ones to troubleshoot. And then I would also remind folks of the Extensity, EXTENSITY. That's an excellent plugin for Chrome that allows you essentially to turn off plugins that you're not using at any given time, for the purpose of keeping them installed and at your fingertips if you need them, but then having them not be active otherwise.
What is your ad blocker of choice on Chrome now, Dr. Neiffer?
Well, I don't have one at all on my work account anymore because I deleted it. But the one I'm using otherwise is AdBlock.
Oh, okay. I still use uBlock Origin, and it's still a revelation when I share that at school. It's not something that all the students have been exposed to, and
yeah.
Hopefully we've shared that with teachers, but I mean, being able to block all ads on YouTube, pre-roll, in the videos, everything. I mean, I just cringe whenever I'm in a educational setting and I see someone playing a YouTube video and an ad for Grammarly or whatever comes up first, or there's a little ad at the bottom, and it's like, please. And honestly, it's one of the reasons, I think I've mentioned this, we're going Chromebook for our 1-to-1 next year, all grades. We've had iPads for 6th grade on a test basis this year. Love the iPad. I've enjoyed it. I'm going to miss many things about it, but I love being able to block ads in for myself and certainly in teaching, etc. So that is good to know. And another related issue with Chrome, and I don't have an article for this, but my wife had been having trouble with Seesaw and activities because there was something in a new Chrome build that had actually caused these issues. And so she'd had to move to Firefox for a while, and it was documented in some Facebook groups and forums and things like that. But yeah, it's interesting, the interplay. This was a core feature of Chrome actually that had broken that. And Seesaw, hopefully they've resolved that. But we need to be updating our software, and unfortunately that has caused her to be a little gun shy of the, hey, time to update Chrome. It's something that we all need to be keeping updated in as far as security, but you do want to be wary. And I think it's still good to have more than one browser on your machine. Doesn't happen that often that we need to say, hey, we better fire up Firefox or, fire up Safari or something different. But anyway, there are different browsers, and your troubleshooting technique is absolutely on target. Extensity is wonderful. Anytime people are having wonky things happen, restarting the computer, disabling all extensions, and then re-enabling them selectively and seeing if the issue recurs, those are very good troubleshooting techniques. And especially on a Chromebook, there's not that many things that can go wrong. So once you've restarted extensions, you can power wash. I mean, that's about it. That's like you've got a brand new machine, but extensions will still come back when you log in. So being able to
Yep.
disable those and troubleshoot is a good technique to know for yourself and to be able to recommend to students and colleagues.
And then a last article that I think is super interesting, Chrome Unbox reported on April 19th that there is a new Documents tab in Google Photos that could be more for your future drive storage. And we had mentioned that Google Lens technology, which is the technology that I think it was purchased by Google several years ago and has been integrated into their systems. But if you go to Google Photos now, and I was going to double check this tonight before we jumped on, but there's a new Documents tab that takes all of the things that you snapped photographs of when you upload Google Photos and puts them in its own document tab. And that's been a strategy of mine literally for 15 years now, right? Where I, on a smartphone or in a camera, I would take a document and take a quick photo of it to scan it for time. But Michael Pergio at Chrome Unbox talks about how that this is probably a strategy that over time will create more and interesting ways for Google to kind of capture your data to make it useful for you. And so one thing we talked about, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was that you can now copy and paste. There's an automatic OCR that happens in documents that you can just copy and paste text of things that you upload to Google Photos. And so this seems kind of Apple-y to me, actually, this notion of trying to add more functionality to something that's already integrated together in everything that you do. But I love Google Photos. It's an important part of what I do. In fact, I received an email from today from Google telling me that my storage plan that was a free gift from Google when I purchased a Chromebook a couple of years ago is coming to an end, which means that I would need to purchase storage to continue to have enough of what's there. I'm only using 90 gigabytes on my personal account, so it's not a huge amount of data, but 40 gigs of that is Google Photos. And I'm, frankly, for the $2 a month I spend for 100 gigs from Google, it's more than worth it to me to keep all my photographs in one location.
Absolutely. And we've had that conversation as well. I think we did have a Chromebook that gave us more storage space or whatever, but we're paying a little bit to Apple each month for iCloud storage. I think it's absolutely worth every penny, and all of us are hopefully having our iPhones and iDevices regularly back up. We've got iCloud Drive enabled, so desktop documents, those things are backed up. And then with Google, and I had to make sure that the kids had each joined our Google family to be able to share the space. So incidentally, I recently removed our son from our family in Apple, but that was because he wanted to continue an Apple Music subscription and we did not. And so anyway, playlists and all those things, in case you're wondering, move just fine when you reach the point of maturity and you're no longer part of your family's Apple family. But I don't know that we don't have to remove him from Google. So, he's still part of that storage space. But this is part of what we've talked about on the show before, and it's been a couple weeks. But Google's a company. Google's making money. We've seen changes in the education space as far as everything's not free now. And there are these paid enterprise tiers. And I believe some of those are worth paying for. The admin tools are really powerful. And we've had several situations where I, as no longer the tech director, I'm not doing it, but other people, have done some searches and be able to find some things and do some detective work that is only available if you have that more advanced admin console feature. And then being able to, as a consumer needing, to pay for some storage, hey, there's things that are worth paying for. And can I imagine life without Google? I don't want to. I'm very happy to pay for the incredible power and collaborative possibilities that it puts at my fingertips every day.
If using Google's wrong, I don't want to be right, Wes.
There's a quote. I think that may be the show title, right? All right. Well, we have a little bit more time. So what else, sir?
Sure. One quick Microsoft article, just because I noticed this before I saw the article. Let's see. The good folks at the 9 to 5 Google reported that there is a new Microsoft Edge feature called Performance Mode that is, remember, a follow-up from, we've talked about this probably a dozen times now, that Microsoft Edge, the primary Microsoft browser, is built on top of Chromium, which is an open source Google product. And as it turns out, Microsoft, was criticized, pretty roundly criticized for going in that direction because they felt as though this would diminish creativity and innovation because the original Edge browser, which wasn't a primary browser for me, but I thought was a perfectly a good alternative to Chrome, that development went away. But what's happening now is Microsoft's building some really interesting stuff on top of Chromium to try to distinguish itself from Chrome. And this performance mode essentially adds in tweaks on top of the Chromium open source browser, including some new performance measures that its performance mode allows the browser to scale back, especially for modest CPUs and modest amounts of memory. And the reason why I noticed this is because I do use the Edge browser on my laptop and desktop, especially as it relates to some projects I do that are Microsoft shops. And the other day I noticed that one of the tabs was dimmer than the others. And I went to go look, and there was a little pop-up notification there saying this tab has been put to sleep to diminish resources. And I was like, well, that's really clever. You can you can download Chrome extensions that do something similar to that. But this performance mode is baked into Edge, and the idea is that it's going to be useful for kind of tab addicts. I'm a tab addict. I would guess that Dr. Fryer's a tab addict. My friend Mike Agostinelli is a tab addict to the extreme. For those that do that, it's going to diminish those resources. And so, a very interesting thing on behalf of Microsoft.
Yes, I use Tab Suspender. The Great Suspender, I think, actually has more users and reviews, but Tab Suspender is one that I have used for years, and that is related to a little back channel conversation with Peggy talking about ad blockers. You can run more than one, but be aware, everything that you're running on your machine, just like, with Windows in the system tray or Apple up in the menu bar, like all these different things, they all use memory and resources. This is actually one reason why it's nice to blow your machine away, completely have everything backed up, install a pristine copy of your operating system, and then only install the things that you really need, because a lot of us over time end up, installing this label printer, and then, get this Adobe thing, and oh, look, they're going to run at startup. And on the Mac, I'm sure you probably use this a lot, Jason, but just like on Windows where you have the activity monitor, you have a process, what's it called? I think actually Windows calls it an activity or a process manager, and it's called an activity monitor. And so if you go into your utilities folder of your Mac, you will see the file activity monitor. Again, here's a quick little troubleshooting mini lesson. Open up Activity Monitor, and you have different tabs, and you can see what's using the most CPU. You can click over to the Memory tab and see what's using the most memory. And it's kind of shocking sometimes to see how much Chrome uses. So I would just say caution, beware. All ad blockers are not created the same. That's one of the reasons I like uBlock Origin. It's pretty thin and light in terms of its memory consumption, and just don't have more extensions turned on than you need to. The same way that you shouldn't have a whole lot of extra software that just runs at startup, so it's there and it's quick, but there's a cost for that. Now we have so much memory on our machines and they're so fast, maybe you're not going to notice, but it can make a difference. And especially on lighter devices like student devices and Chromebooks, having a ton of tabs open can cause memory issues. Thinking about video conferencing in Google Meet and things like that, there are lots of folks for whom memory is still at a premium, and these kind of things make a difference. So be aware of the impact that it has, and just, take a look and take an audit every once in a while, seeing everything that you've got open and all the things that you have running. Maybe you can purge a little bit and open up some more memory on your machine.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, would you mind doing that motherboard article about the FBI? That's a pretty big headline, I think.
Yeah. This is from last week. Motherboard reported on April 13th that the FBI decided that there was a number of Exchange server hacks that have happened in the last several months. And the FBI released bulletins to across Fortune 500 companies, schools, and universities, and noticed there were still hundreds of unpatched servers across the United States. And so they decided to hack into those servers and to patch the vulnerability themselves.
That's incredible. If that's ever happened, I don't know that it's been announced. That sounds unprecedented to me.
No, it has to be. And to be clear, I mean, I have the most mixed of mixed feelings about this because I feel like that I'm almost certain that uh, uh, that they had to make contact. They had to attempt to make contact, right? And the FBI very regularly sends out security bulletins to security firms, to higher education, to scientific institutions, to corporate interest in the United States. When there are hacks discovered, there's a very active infrastructure for that in the United States. I would also note that the FBI also obtained a court order, so it's not like they were doing this rogue. But yes, I thought the same thing when I read this, that if this has happened before, it hasn't been particularly announced. And it's a dangerous world we live in. We've talked about this a couple of different times. Several weeks ago, and Wes, I know you had mentioned this in the HBO series that you would like to watch, the quotations from that series talked about that the next war is going to be virtual, and it will have a lot of collateral damage in regards to us as consumers and as computer users.
Forget the next war. The war is happening right now. It is truly occurring today, full-on cyber war happening between China and the U.S., Russia and the U.S., North Korea, Iran, these other actors, and it is going to influence more and more the kinetic war. We have cyber war and we have kinetic war, and I just think a lot of us are asleep to how incredibly hostile international relations are today, how important collaboration is, and also. I don't know. I could pontificate philosophically and politically on how important it is for us to try to find common ground and hopefully to have governments that are not authoritarian and that can actually be allies together. But it is, the more I read, the more I know I need to go back to my password manager and make sure I got all those things changed, because it's a dangerous world out there, kids. Take care of yourselves. All right, we have gone past the top of the hour, sir. Anything else you wanted to hit before Geeks of the Week?
No, although I will tease that next week I'd love to talk about Dogecoin.
And with that, we're going to have everyone with bated breath waiting for next week. So my Geek of the Week quickly is that I'm doing a webinar on Saturday, and it's free. And it is actually going to be a slightly modified version of what I shared for our middle school language teachers a few years ago. Shout out to Joe Dale. This is going to be for the some language teachers in England. So if you're in England, it's on Saturday from 3:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Tune in. If you're here in U.S. Central Time, it'll be 9:30 a.m., 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So it's called Lesson Ideas and Tips for Language Teachers Using Scratch, Minecraft, and More. And it is free, so you can register with Eventbrite. How about you, Dr. Neiffer?
Well, I want to mention that with new hardware coming along from Apple, this is a wonderfully important time to consider selling your old devices before you buy new ones. And I have two recommendations there. One of them is Swappa, which is, in fact, I'm 99% sure that you turned me on to Swappa, Dr. Fryer, but it's a place to go buy and sell used items. And then also Gazelle is a little less of a fussy one in that they will tell you how much they'll pay you. They send you a box, you send it back to them. No fuss, no muss. And the reason why I mention it this week is because a couple weeks ago, I wanted to buy an updated iPad. I had an iPad Mini 2 that was no longer being updated anymore, but I wanted one with a lot of storage on it so I could put movies on it for when we're traveling again. And then I also wanted one with the ability to go over cell towers because I have a tablet plan on T-Mobile, and those are really expensive. And so I priced out an iPad Air 3. That's this thing right here. And I have one that it definitely wasn't new, but I couldn't tell there wasn't any damage to it. But I went around my office and found electronics I was no longer using, and I sold them on Swappa, and then I used that money to buy basically directly buy then my new iPad Air 3, which is wonderful. And so selling used electronics is a great strategy to do that. I have a couple friends that always seem to have the new stuff, and it's because that they're regularly selling the stuff they aren't using anymore instead of letting it sit in a drawer in your home.
And don't let it sit there too long because it loses value and you can't get as much for it. So,
absolutely.
All right. Thank Peggy for joining us live. Encourage any of you who can to join us live, usually on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central. middle of the night if you are in UTC. All of our show notes and referenced articles can be found at edstar.com/links. And actually, what I end up doing, and I apologize for posting our shows late the last couple of weeks. I'll try to do that a little faster this week. Usually now I'm going to YouTube and I tap live replay. Interestingly, that's not the text chat, which we drop all of the links in as we go along the show. And Peggy sometimes drops in links as well, which are great. They're not available immediately. It takes a little while for YouTube to process them, but in a day or so, you can change it from top chat to live chat, go all the way to the end of the show, and then you can just scroll down through all of the links that we have in order. But you can also just go to our website to see that. So we encourage everyone to stay savvy, stay safe. Please follow us on Twitter at EdTechSR. We do sometimes take a break, and if we do, we'll always let you know on Twitter, but you can also find us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. Let us know if you listen to the show. We do love feedback. So until next time, happy trails.
Good night.